That was when 25-year-old Erica Mae Butts was hyperventilating in court after receiving a life sentence for the death of 3-year-old Serenity Richardson in 2011. Prosecutors said the girl was repeatedly abused inside a South Carolina home, including being struck with a belt several times after wetting herself. When she was finally taken to the hospital, doctors documented extreme bruising and severe injuries across her body, and she later died from the trauma. Serenity had been left in Erica's care while her mother was trying to relocate. Another woman living in the home, Shanita Latrice Cunningham, was also charged in the case. Both women entered guilty pleas to homicide by child abuse and were sentenced to life in prison. They responded by collapsing in the courtroom, making a scene and crying hysterically before being dragged out. Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter is in custody, and here's what we know so far. On September 10, 2025, conservative activist Charlie Kirk was gunned down while speaking at Utah Valley University, the fatal shot tearing through his neck from nearly 200 yards away. Police say the assassin was 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, a Utah man whose own father recognized him in surveillance photos and turned him in. Investigators found he had crept onto the roof of the Losi Center with a bolt-action rifle fitted with a scope, leaving behind eerie forensic traces like palm marks, boot prints, and imprints where his arm braced the gun. Even more disturbing were the shell casings scattered at the scene, one taunting, "Hey fascists, catch," while others were engraved with bizarre memes. Robinson also allegedly talked about retrieving a rifle from a bush, wrapping it in a towel, and engraving bullets in online Discord messages. Kirk collapsed on stage in front of a crowd of panicked students, bleeding out as security dragged him away. He died en route to the hospital, while Robinson was captured the next day and now faces multiple felony charges, including aggravated murder in what authorities are calling a targeted political assassination. But key questions still remain: how long Robinson planned the shooting, exactly how he obtained the rifle, and whether anyone else knew of his intentions beyond cryptic online posts. Officials say he acted alone, yet his mix of political slogans, meme-like engravings, and anti-fascist references leave investigators and the public still searching for a clear motive beyond his political anger toward Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk has been shot in the neck. The 31-year-old conservative activist, founder of Turning Point USA and father of 2 young children, was speaking at Utah Valley University when gunfire erupted just 20 minutes into the event. The bullet tore through his neck, sending the crowd into a frenzy as people dove for cover and security dragged him from the stage, leaving a pool of blood on the ground where he'd been sitting. Kirk, who rose to prominence as an outspoken conservative speaker at college campuses, was immediately rushed to a hospital, but his condition remains undisclosed. The tragedy unfolded against a tense backdrop. Over 14,000 students and faculty had signed a petition demanding that the university cancel his appearance, citing his controversial rhetoric. Instead, he arrived under the banner of his American Comeback Tour, only for the event to end in violence. Authorities confirmed that an older man was arrested, with reports suggesting the shot came from a rooftop 200 yards away. Police immediately locked down the campus as the FBI joined the investigation, while political leaders from Donald Trump to Utah senators issued prayers in outrage. As of now, Charlie's death has not been confirmed, but given the severity of his injuries, the outlook is quite grim. 71-year-old George Hodgson Zinn became an unsettling side character in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. As Kirk lay bleeding on stage, Zinn, a well-known Utah political agitator with a history of disruptive antics, told bystanders and police that he was the shooter. Officers quickly detained him, sparking confusion as viral footage showed the elderly man being hauled away in cuffs. But Zinn clearly didn't fit the profile. Within hours, investigators announced that he had no connection to the rooftop sniper. Instead, he was charged only with obstruction, echoing a bizarre past that included a 2013 arrest for allegedly emailing a bomb threat joke to the Salt Lake City Marathon. On Halloween night in 1984, 29-year-old Doreen Erbert answered her door expecting trick-or-treaters, but instead was confronted by her ex-husband, William Michael Dennis, wearing the same creepy big bad wolf mask he had worn at a party the year before. Dennis had never forgiven Doreen for the accidental drowning of their 4-year-old son Paul years earlier, and had grown obsessed with the delusion that she wanted the boy dead. Armed with a machete, he forced his way inside and launched a savage frenzy of blows, striking Doreen dozens of times. She was 8 months pregnant, and the attack was so brutal that it ripped open her abdomen and literally expelled her unborn child onto the floor, the baby showing deep chop wounds and pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later described the scene as straight out of a horror movie, with blood splattered across the entryway and the mask lying discarded nearby. Dennis was eventually sentenced to death, leaving behind a crime that remains one of the most grotesque murders ever committed on Halloween. Futoshi Matsunaga was a Japanese serial killer who turned psychological control into a weapon, forcing victims to torture and even murder their own family members through threats, isolation, and extreme brainwashing. Operating in the late 1990s, he targeted vulnerable households, took control of their finances, and used staged punishments to break people mentally until they obeyed him out of fear. Investigators later revealed that several killings were carried out by victims themselves after prolonged coercion, creating a chain of violence where family members as young as 5 years old were forced to turn on each other. Several bodies were dismembered and destroyed to erase evidence, leaving little physical trace until a survivor escaped and alerted police. Matsunaga ended up being sentenced to death in 2005, and the case remains one of Japan's most extreme examples of serial manipulation. Daisy Coleman grew up in a family marked by repeated tragedy. In 2009, her father was killed when their car slipped on black ice and plunged into a ravine in Missouri. In 2012, at age 14, Daisy was sexually assaulted while incapacitated and left outside her home in freezing temperatures. Despite hospital records documenting injuries and extreme intoxication, the charges were later dropped, and she was publicly discredited, triggering years of vicious harassment. In 2013, the family's home burned down under mysterious circumstances, and in 2018, Daisy's younger brother Tristan died in a car crash, mirroring their father's death. By 2020, Daisy was struggling with severe PTSD, harassment, a reported stalker, and learning she couldn't have children, a condition doctors said may have been linked to the assault. Under the weight of it all, she took her own life that August at the young age of 23. 4 months later, her mother Melinda also died by suicide. Daisy's story was documented in Audrey and Daisy, released while she was still trying to rebuild her life. Here's a video showing exactly what not to do during a grease fire. I don't know if this is a moment of true horror or true stupidity.
Turn it off! Turn it, what the fuck? What do I do? Bro, turn it off! Turn it off! Tanner, hurry up! Tanner, turn it off! Tanner, turn it off! I don't know what to do! Grab it! Grab it! Turn it off! Grab it! Tanner! Grab it! Tanner! Oh my god, Tanner! What is it? Tanner! What is it? Oh my god, Tanner! I don't know what it is! It's up there!
Instead of standing around like deer in headlights while the fire kept growing, the solution here was actually pretty simple. The obvious first move should have been turning the burner off immediately. As long as the heat stays on, the flames keep feeding. Immediately after that, they should have grabbed a larger pot, a metal lid, or even a baking tray and covered the pan completely. No oxygen means no fire. You don't throw water on it, you don't move it, and you definitely don't dump it across the kitchen. What ends up happening works out purely by luck, not because it was smart. Dumping a burning pan can spread flaming oil everywhere, and that's usually how small kitchen fires turn into house fires. Grease fires look chaotic, but the solution is simple. Kill the heat, cover it, leave it alone. In August of 2020, 5-year-old Cannon Henent was riding his bike outside of his Wilson, North Carolina home when his 25-year-old neighbor Darius Sessoms suddenly walked up and shot him point blank in the head in front of his 2 sisters. The murder was described as execution style and left the community completely stunned, especially since Sessoms had shared dinner with Cannon's family just days prior. He was arrested within 24 hours and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, receiving life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, no clear motive has ever been revealed. Here's a photo of George Lincoln Rockwell, founder of the American Nazi Party, at a 1967 rally. Rockwell built his movement around hate-filled rallies in open admiration for Hitler. But his end came not at the hands of his enemies. In August of 1967, Rockwell was gunned down outside of a laundromat in Arlington, Virginia, shot twice through his car window by John Patler, a bitter former ally he had recently expelled from the party. The man who preached violence and division was assassinated by one of his own followers, leaving the American Nazi Party leaderless and fractured.
Where are you? I probably don't have much time left to tell my mom that I love her if I die.
That was the voice of 16-year-old Kyle Plush, heard in his final moments as he slowly died alone in his family's minivan. In April of 2018, Kyle became trapped in a Honda Odyssey in his high school parking lot when the power-folding third-row seat suddenly collapsed, folding forward and pinning him upside down by the chest, neck, and head. The position left him inverted, compressing his lungs and restricting blood flow. For roughly 30 minutes, Kyle called 911 multiple times, calmly but increasingly distressed, telling dispatchers he was trapped and struggling to breathe.
Hello, Cincinnati 911 is the address of the emergency. Cincinnati 911. The Seven Hills what parking lot?
As the pressure worsened, his voice grew weaker and more labored.
Where are you? I probably don't have much time left to tell my mom that I love her if I die. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm trapped inside my gold Honda Odyssey van in the Southport parking lot of Seven Hills Beth. Send officers immediately. I'm almost dead.
His calls were repeatedly misclassified as accidental butt dials, and officers sent to search for him checked the wrong area before leaving. Kyle remained trapped for hours, unable to move, eventually losing consciousness and dying from positional asphyxia. He was later found by his parents, still wedged beneath the folded seat. His death was ruled accidental, but the case exposed serious failures in emergency response and raised lasting concerns about vehicle seat designs and how narrowly Kyle missed being rescued. This was the moment when a routine day on the slope suddenly spiraled into chaos, when a chairlift at Georgia's Gadori Ski Resort malfunctioned and began racing backward down the mountain. The lift reversed at high speed, smashing chairs together at the bottom terminal and violently throwing riders to the ground, while others were forced to jump to avoid being crushed by swinging metal seats. Screams erupted as people piled at the base of the lift, with some narrowly missing being struck by flying chairs and bodies. At least 8 people were seriously injured, including tourists from several countries, with reported injuries ranging from broken limbs to head and spinal trauma. Investigators later concluded the rollback was triggered by an electrical failure, which was only worsened by operator error after emergency procedures were not properly followed. In the aftermath, the lift operator was suspended and resort managers were forced to resign. Criminal and civil investigations later followed, examining how a system designed to keep riders safe turned into a death trap within seconds. In 2010, 77-year-old rancher and hunting expert Don Alejo lived alone on a piece of land near Ciudad Victoria, Mexico, when a local cartel began demanding that he hand over his ranch, a common tactic in the region. They suddenly gave him 24 hours to vacate the property or be killed. Alejo told them he'd think about it, but instead, when the cartel left, he prepared for war. That night, he stayed up fortifying his home. He barricaded doors, moved furniture into firing positions, and set up multiple loaded rifles and shotguns at windows facing all approaches. At dawn, several cartel trucks rolled in expecting an easy takeover, but instead, the gunmen walked straight into a one-man ambush. From inside the house, Don Alejo opened fire with military-level precision. The firefight lasted nearly an hour, and by the time authorities arrived, they found 4 cartel members dead and at least 2 more critically wounded. The house was torn apart by gunfire, and Don Alejo was found found inside, killed by return fire still clutching his shotgun. Mexican Marines who processed the scene later said it was obvious he knew he wouldn't survive. He had prepared it as a final stand. Don Alejo's ranch was never taken by the cartel, and he became a national symbol of defiance in a region where most people are too terrified to fight back. YouTube prankster Vitaly rose to fame in the early 2010s for viral public stunts built around shock, confrontation, and pushing social boundaries. But as his platform grew, those stunts increasingly crossed into real-world violence. In 2014, he was arrested in Miami after physically attacking a woman in what he called a prank. Years later, Vitaly admitted he was high on psychedelic mushrooms when he punched another woman in the face, a completely unprovoked assault that left her with serious facial injuries requiring hospitalization. In 2016, he escalated further by carrying out a bomb hoax at LAX that caused mass panic and resulted in criminal convictions. In 2022, he was detained again after running onto the field during the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, interrupting a live international match and being forcibly removed by security. Afterward, Vitaly's behavior only continued to deteriorate, culminating in his arrest in the Philippines in April of 2025 after a series of live-streamed incidents in Manila where he was filmed harassing mall security guards, confronting random civilians, trespassing on private property, and allegedly stealing a security guard's phone during an altercation. Philippine authorities classified the conduct as harassment, theft, and public disorder, charging him with various offenses including unjust vexation. He's currently detained at a jail facility in Taguig while awaiting trial, and has not been deported after both the United States and Russia declined to accept him. Vitaly has already spent around 8 months in pretrial detention, and if convicted, he faces up to 18 months in a Philippine prison, following a steady escalation from viral stunts to criminal charges. In 2007, NASA astronaut Lisa Nowak made headlines for one of the strangest scandals in space history. Obsessed with her ex-boyfriend's new partner, Lisa drove 900 miles from Houston to Orlando in a single stretch, allegedly wearing adult diapers so she wouldn't have to stop for the bathroom. In her car, police found a BB gun, a knife, pepper spray, rubber tubing, and trash bags, tools suggesting a plan to kidnap. She ambushed Colleen Shipman in an airport parking lot, spraying her with mace before being arrested. Once a respected astronaut who had flown on the Space Shuttle Discovery, Nowak became infamous as the first NASA astronaut ever fired after the bizarre meltdown. In 2009, she managed to avoid jail time, receiving a year of probation and community service. This disturbing sign was recently put up at a cemetery in Tampa Bay. In January of 2004, Texas math teacher Alejandro Navarro checked into the ER with serious heart and kidney problems, knowing he might not make it out. But instead of resting, he pulled out his laptop and started grading papers, determined to finish his students' work even as doctors prepared him for critical care. The next day, Navarro tragically passed away, and the photo his daughter shared of him bent over his computer in the hospital went viral. In the aftermath of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012, first responders stumbled upon a scene of unimaginable horror. One officer later recalled, "I then walked into a room with Sergeant Carrio. At first glance, it did not appear that there were any casualties. To the left of the room as you walk in, there was a bathroom in the corner. There was a massive pileup of bodies in this room. It appeared as if the teachers in the room, immediately upon hearing gunshots, began to pack children into the bathroom. Sergeant Carrio began to lift bodies off the top of the pile and bring them to an open floor area. He began to look for life signs, wounds, and to attempt to find a pulse. One little girl was sitting, crouched between the toilet seat in the back corner of the room. 17 people lost their lives in that single bathroom, 15 children and 2 teachers. By then, the gunman had already murdered 9 others, and by the time it ended, 26 victims were deceased. To this day, it stands as the deadliest elementary school shooting in U.S. history.